What is it that makes a Studio Ghibli film so enchanting? Undoubtedly, it's the stunning visuals and complex characters, but it's also the worlds crafted through Hayao Miyazaki's unique vision. Fantasy and science fiction writers have long distinguished between hard and soft sci-fi, as well as hard and soft magic systems. But I want to expand on these ways that we look at the fantasy and science fiction genres by contrasting two very different methods for crafting different types of worlds and stories that immerse the reader in different ways. And it helps explain why J.K. Rowling's clarifications, let's call them, fall flat. This is an essay on hard world building and soft world building, co-written by myself and my friend Ali Gordon. See, world building isn't just creating a fictional world in the abstract, it's also about what you consciously choose to convey to the reader or viewer in the text. You world build as you write. That's what builds the world that they know. At one end of the spectrum, the textbook example of hard world building is probably J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien created Elvish with not just random words translated from English, but a whole alphabet, phonetics, grammar, its own syntax. Gondor and Rohan have complex and detailed histories, and Tolkien goes out of his way to communicate those things to the reader throughout the story. Hard world building is about immersion through giving the reader or viewer detailed, logical, and even realistic cultures, languages, geography, and elsewise, with an eye for how they all work together. This is probably the style that you're most familiar with, and it goes back to authors like Arthur C. Clarke writing stories that take account of time dilation across space, or how sound and matter travels through space when creating his worlds. The style of world building is aimed at immersing the reader by placing them in a world as believable and grounded as possible with its own web of logic. And it works. It allows the reader to more easily visualize the world you create and buy into the more fantastical elements that you introduce. It's a great way to craft a world. What then is soft world building? In the absolutely beautiful Studio Ghibli film Spirited Away, 8 million spirits bathe at Yubaba's bathhouse in the middle of an endless ocean made by rain, with a train running through it like an artery. And about halfway through the film, Yubaba detects something terrible approaching. A monolithic spirit with a foul stench arrives, and Shishiro has to clean it herself. As she's doing it, she finds what she calls a thorn in its side, and after pulling it out, a mass of disgusting rubbish and rot fills the room. A being they call the river spirit then emerges from the water, leaving behind gold as payment, and they treat it with great reverence, almost worship-like, before it rushes off. It's a subtle scene for world building, but it's defined by how little Miyazaki actually tells us. Miyazaki leaves it up to the viewer to imagine and interrogate just why what happens in this scene happens. The river spirit is only cured when Shishiro pulls out the masses of trash hidden inside it. From this, we imagine a world where spirits are corrupted by the waste of mankind, hence why the first thing we see pulled out is a bicycle. We could go even further and tie this to how they hate the smell of humans, a major point earlier in the film. And we see later on that the healing bud that the river spirit leaves behind has some loosely defined power, and no clear logical world-building connection is ever drawn between the river spirit and that bud. Finally, we can infer from how they treat the spirit with a reverence of sorts, if only fleetingly, that there is some kind of social hierarchy to the spirits that we never see explored beyond this. Yubaba's social place as a sorcerer among spirits is never truly explained, and no justification is given for the bizarre way spirits look and sound, like the hopping lantern, and the setting is all intentionally peculiar and unconventional, and it's beautiful. In 2002, an interviewer told Hayao Miyazaki that what strikes me about Spirited Away compared to your previous films is a real freedom of the author, a feeling that you can take the film and the story anywhere you wish, independent of logic even. In reply, he said this: "Everybody can make a film with logic, but my way is to not use logic. At a certain moment in that process, the lid is opened and very different ideas and visions are liberated. I should not handle a scene in a certain way for the sake of the audience. For instance, what for me constitutes the end of the film is the scene in which Shiro takes the train all by herself. I remember the first time I took a train alone and what my feelings were at the time. To bring those feelings across in the scene, it was important to not have a view through the window of the train, like mountains or a forest, because they are so focused on the ride itself. It's while working on that scene that I realized that I work in a non-conscious way. There are more profound things than simply logic that guide the creation of the story. These more profound things, as he puts it, are exactly what soft world building aims to capture and harness. Miyazaki is known for having an incredible grasp of the themes and emotional thread of his stories, and it's those that come through vividly in the world building and grip us, never letting go. I want to be clear though here. Soft world building is a different method here that prioritizes different things to hard world building. That's the difference. It's not an inherently better method, which is a mistake I do not want you to make. See, it's the massive gaps that Miyazaki leaves in the viewer's knowledge of the way this world works that creates an otherworldly, mysterious, and foreign feeling to the world of Spirited Away. Where The Lord of the Rings drags us in through explicit depth in the economic, cultural, and political details of Middle-earth, Spirited Away has imagined depth that comes from the viewer or reader themselves wanting to know more. It's a place full of questions. Telling the viewer explicitly just what all of this means would detract from that enchanting, otherworldly feeling of the spirit world, especially when the story is very intentionally framed from the perspective of a 10-year-old child. That feeling of being lost, being spirited away, is crucial to the tonal atmosphere of the story. The soft world building here makes the story more immersive by putting that atmospheric feeling first, without it being wholly logical. If hard world building is a world that immerses us through consciously using concrete rules, consistency, and transparency to create a sense of grounded realism and depth, then soft world building immerses us through consciously using the unknown, flexible rules, and the reader's imaginative involvement to give depth and otherworldliness. This could be on the level that you choose as a world builder to not have all of the answers, to just not know. Or you could withhold the answers that you do have for effect intentionally. There are two ends of a spectrum, hard and soft here, though the methods can be used together in crafting a fictional world. Other examples of stories at the softer end of the spectrum include Boon Jong-ho's Snowpiercer and Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, both of which have a profound disregard for logic. As Nebula-winning sci-fi author Nancy Kress puts it, even the hardest sci-fi involves some speculation, or else it would not be science fiction. The first real strength of soft world building is it arguably gives you more creative freedom, because the story is not constantly justifying itself to the viewer. Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind could have whales flying through the sky midway through the film if Miyazaki wanted, and the film would be no less for it. We wouldn't think so. Miyazaki's stories are so constantly full of unexplained, strange moments like the bug-style planes in Castle in the Sky, the hopping lantern in Spirited Away. Even if he does have answers to these questions, he never gives them to us, and intentionally so, and none of his worlds are worse off for it. It's just a thing that happens and adds something to the story on a different level. Allowing itself to be strange, to be unique, to be wholly outside the bounds of our usual rules without justification, creates that enchanting feeling that Ghibli films seem to have. But it also means, and this is a really important point, that the world is flexible enough to adapt to create settings and obstacles needed to tell the story however you want, rather than fitting the story to an established world. This is what we see in perhaps the most famous example of a soft world-build story ever, the Harry Potter series. J.K. Rowling has discussed how world-building elements were added with each book as she wrote them, like the Department of Mysteries and the Order of the Phoenix, all to better support Harry's emotional arc. That was only possible because she left so much room for possibility and strangeness in her world. Even within a single book, that flexibility is really useful. A second strength is that soft world-building stories also don't tend to struggle as much from pacing lulls in the first and second acts, because they spend so little time delivering exposition. In watching Spirited Away, the only real moments of exposition early in the story include Haku telling Shishiro what happens to humans in the spirit world, and the vow that Yubaba took to give anyone a job, both of which are fleeting moments. This is a marked strength compared to hard world-built novels, which sometimes struggle with pacing because we need to understand so much of the world for the story to work, so we spend more time on it. It's because of this that soft world-building excels at character-driven stories. In Kiki's delivery service, virtually nothing is communicated about how this world works, where almost every town or city has its own witch with powers like foresight and flight. These would change a lot of things, but this is because it doesn't matter for the story. Nothing in Kiki's struggles or decisions come from interacting with those world-building elements. It's all about how she wants to prove herself. She works incredibly hard, then burns out and has to learn to let herself rest. We can spend all of our time on that meaningful, personal, character-driven story. I think J.K. Rowling really nicely captures a third strength of soft world-building in saying that those characters belong to the readers as well as to me, and each has their own life in the heads of those who have read them. Sometimes the inner lives of characters, as imagined by readers, are not what I imagined for them, but the joy of books is that we all make our own mental cast. While this is still true for hard world building to an extent, this is where soft world building excels as well, where hard world building means we dictate to the reader or viewer what the world is like. Soft world building invites them to give their own input, consciously and subconsciously, making it an imaginative exercise as they read or watch. And that's fun. That is immersive. It's literally you putting yourself into the world. That's because world building is not just about the reader understanding the world, which is a mistake a lot of people seem to make. World building is about crafting an atmosphere, a tone, a mood in your fictional piece. All of these constitute immersion just as much, if not more, than detail. You can, of course, still create these things with hard world building, absolutely, but it's a different method with usually different results, so it depends what you want. You can still create a grim dark world with soft world building, but that might come from a sensation of Lovecraftian powers bearing down on the populace, rather than deep knowledge of just how little food and water there is available. The crucial thing is this. While hard world building stories can absolutely have a lot of depth, Tolkien, once again, is renowned for this. The fewer requirements to rationalize soft world building choices means you can prioritize and be more flexible with that meaning that you want to imbue your world with. The Harry Potter series is full of some of the most bizarre and incoherent world building I have ever seen, and I love it, from the way money works in inconceivable exchange rates to the use of freely available love potions among children. Yeah, but the Wizarding world was not created to immerse through grounded detail and intricate, consistent rules, but to immerse through a feeling of whimsy and opportunity, and to mirror the oddball characters of the Wizarding world, making it feel like the world and the characters all fit together really nicely. All of this creates a light-hearted atmosphere that is slowly lost as the books go on and grow darker. This is why perhaps the strangest things in the Wizarding world building are mentioned in the first 4 books, before Voldemort's return to power in the Goblet of Fire. And this is also perhaps why J.K. Rowling's repeated clarifications of how her world works fall flat. That wizards just crap on the floor and magic it. Dumbledore's long-lost magical Hermione and Ron had a troubled marriage. Cedric Diggory was a Nagini is an Indonesian. Yeah, and only one of those was a lie. See, it's trying to rationalize soft world building that was never meant to be rationalized. The result is that the answers just feel off, like random conclusions, meaning you don't gain that immersion through detail like we do with Middle-earth, and you dispel much of the magical atmosphere by clarifying these things. It also undermines the reader's involvement by dictating to them parts of the story they were previously encouraged to imagine. Though I don't necessarily think that people were wondering how wizards went to the bathroom in the 1800s. At all. Yeah. The bottom line is this. When world building, you don't need to feel compelled to justify everything you create, especially not things that are irrelevant to setup and payoff. Things can just be bizarre, strange, or even nonsensical, provided the reader sees that more profound, as Miyazaki puts it, meaning. To ask questions, to create a particular atmosphere, vision, or characterization for your world, all of which are important for immersion too. Because ultimately, viewers of Spirited Away, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Howl's Moving Castle don't need to understand all of those things to follow the character's story. That is the thread we follow. Now, none of this is to say that having strange or bizarre world building will work and achieve these things. Nothing guarantees your readers will see it the same way you do, and you may just end up with bad, illogical, weird world building that no one can see themselves in. However, if you want to try soft world building as an experiment, then find a character-driven story you want to tell, and figure out what lore is absolutely essential for the reader to understand about your world, like that Yubaba took an oath to give a job to everyone who asks. Then, build the rest of your world with those more profound things in mind, using whatever bizarre, strange, or otherworldly imagery and setting you like that fits that atmosphere, tone, character, and meaning that you want to convey. Just see how it pans out. You might like it, and others might too. This is just a thing, a theory that I find interesting in how we make fiction. Like with everything else, there are trends in the way we make art. And sometimes it's useful and interesting to question why those trends are the way they are. Ultimately, it is absolutely best that you do it however the way you want, but this is a fun intellectual exercise. And hey, if you want to talk more about this sort of stuff, then I would love to have you join us over on the Patreon Discord. There are tons of writers and world builders talking about this kind of stuff, and I am so happy with how the community has grown and to be a part of it. If you want to support this kind of content, which may be a little bit more niche, I don't know how this video is going to really turn out, to be perfectly honest. Hard to explain, just how much your support really matters, but I can create stuff that is entirely independent of any sort of worries about ads or sponsors. I can just make it for you guys as an audience. That's really what I want to do, because that's where the most meaningful content is going to be found. So thank you so much. Anyways, links are all down below, social media, etc, blah blah blah. You guys are cool. Let me know about your world building and your thoughts down in the comments below. Stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.